Does that hole look like it's directly up and down, or does it look canted off to one side or another? To me, I think that looks straight up and down. Hey everyone. In a previous video, we looked at what we were sort of nicknamed my lock shop in a bag, right? Where I can solve most problems and service most things. Well, you might recall I promised you a little follow-up. The pinning tray, one of the pinning trays in that case, has an interesting feature to its design. You can see in the bottom of these chambers there are additional teeny tiny slots, very thin slots. Why are they there? What are they for? They are for decoding, or trying to decode, Medeco pins, specifically Medeco pins especially from cam locks. If you are not familiar with this design, the rotating pin design in Medeco locks is used in both their conventional keyed locks, but key pin tumbler locks, but also their cam style locks, which do not use a key pin and a driver pin. These locks simply have a small hole on one side, right? So when the key is inserted, these will rotate into the right position based on that little chisel tip on the front, and they will also oscillate up and down in their chamber, hopefully aligning fingers for that sidebar to operate. And if we get just the right view, we might even be able to see in here those fingers that want to protrude inward and poke into those holes. So, what do I have here with this tray? Why did I modify the tray in this fashion? Let's take a closer look. So, those chambers inside of Medeco plugs, you'll notice they accommodate a small cavity where the Medeco pins can rotate partially one way or another. They can rotate, clockwise or counterclockwise, but they are bound, they are limited in their rotation by that small peg. That doesn't give them unlimited travel. So, very nice design, of course, yes, but it also makes these pins utter devils to lay flat when you're trying to check them out, which is exactly what you want those pins to do if you're trying to examine whether they are fore or aft cuts, whether they are left, right, or center rotations. However, if we use these little slots that I've added to this pin tray, they are designed specifically to accommodate for those guide pegs, not just to give them somewhere to go, but in fact to help lock those guide pegs in one spot. And you can use them in order to check out the orientation of the cuts on the bottom of the pins, whether they are fore and aft, obviously, and also whether they are left, right, or center rotation. So there we go. We've got those pegs all in these slots now. In fact, they'll even stop the pins from traversing up and down. Not only does that give us a nice flat surface so I can see the pins more clearly, but it also affords us a view into those bottom chisel tips and to see what kind of orientation we have. Let's look a little more closely. All right. So we have these all lined up. Now notice, obviously, the fingers from the sidebar, they are all going to be aligned, right? They're always going to be at the same height. So what I did is I just kind of slid these up and down in their tray so that all those finger holes were at the same height. When you put the peg on the rear of these pins into the slot, it will always bring the chisel tips of those pins to a perfect up and down plane. They will always be straight up and down facing you. And we can then use that to determine the orientation. Now, obviously, when we're talking about, fore and aft, we can see that pretty clearly. These are fore, they're slanted towards the front face of the lock, and the rear two are slanted aft. So those are aft cuts. This is a biaxial system. Now, let's look at the orientation, however. Let's get right directly above it so there's no parallax. Does that hole look like it's directly up and down, or does it look canted off to one side or another? To me, I think that looks straight up and down. Let's look at the next pin. Does that hole look like it's staring square on at us? No, in my opinion, it's canted over slightly. It's cocked over to this side. If the key were to go in, this pin would have to rotate slightly. It would have to actually turn slightly clockwise as we look down from above in order to grab that finger hole. How about the next one? Does that look straight up and down to you? No, if we look directly on it, it is not. Like, this is straight up and down. This is not. This one is canted the other direction. So this is a counterclockwise pin. This is an aft cut counterclockwise rotation. And the last one? Well, that, I don't know if your eyes are different than mine, but I think here and here we are seeing the same thing. We have a center rotation right there. So we know that this is 4 center, 4 clockwise, aft counterclockwise, and aft center. The last thing we need to check is heights, shallow and deep cuts. Well, you can even see that pretty plainly by lining these holes up. This is a very shallow cut. This would be a deep cut. This looks like it could be a middle cut, and possibly this one could be middle as well. We can get out the calipers to do the finer work on this part here. If you can't just eyeball it, well, that's okay. But if you check your copy of Instacode, you'll see that these are not, as hard as they may be to pick, these are not particularly complex bitting arrangements. Inside the Medeco cam, there are only 3 possible heights that are used for these cuts and these little holes. So it is not as complicated a system as you might think, and with the use of a little tray like this, it's often very possible to do a visual decode if you can pop that top cap out, dump the pins, and have little slots to help you line them up nice and true and evenly. All right, so kind of a quick little video tonight, kind of a short one for you. I don't know how often you find yourself decoding Medeco locks that you've disassembled, but if you do, that 3D printer design, that pin tray, I think that JimyLongs of Tool, I think he put that up on our GitHub or on our Thingiverse account or something like that. So if you want to find the Tool 3D printed tray, you can shout at us on Twitter, or you can, ask in the Slack, and you can add one of those to your, ever-growing equipment bag in this hobby of ours. But good luck to you. I hope you enjoy things and stay safe out there.